Welcome to Lento English. Ready to level up your English? Here we learn through stories, slow, clear, and fun. Listen, relax, and enjoy the journey.
1. Introduction. Something surprising is happening at the White House in the United States. President Donald Trump seems to be changing his ideas about special taxes on things from China. These special taxes are called tariffs. Just last week, he spoke strongly about using high taxes against China. Now he sounds different. News reports say he might lower these taxes a lot. The taxes on some Chinese goods were very high, at 245%. Now the news suggests they could go down to 50% or maybe 65%. This is a very big decrease. It is a large step back from the earlier plan. Why did President Trump change his mind like this? What is the reason for this big difference? Is it because the high taxes caused money problems? High taxes can make things more expensive for people and businesses in America. Or maybe it is a smart plan. Perhaps it is a clever move in the difficult talks about trade between the USA and China. These talks are like a serious game where both sides want to win. The real reason might be a mix of both things. It could be partly because of money problems and partly a planned action. In this story, we will look at why this change might be happening. We will explore the possible money reasons. We will also think about the possibility that it is a careful plan as part of the trade talks. Understanding this change is important because it affects many people and businesses, not just in America and China, but around the world. Let's look closer at the situation and try to understand the different sides of this surprising news from the White House. 2. Big taxes start. 2 weeks before President Trump talked about lower taxes, he started a big change. From the White House, he announced new large taxes on goods from China. These taxes were called tariffs. They were very high. For almost all things that came into America from China, the tax was 145%. This was already a big number. But for some special Chinese products, the tax was even higher. It was 245%. This was a huge increase in taxes for Chinese companies selling to America. The news of these high taxes quickly traveled around the world. It caused big problems in the money markets. Stock markets in many countries started to fall very fast. Almost all the market numbers went down. People and companies lost a very large amount of money. Reports said trillions of dollars were lost in just a short time. It felt like a sudden shock to the world economy. Businesses everywhere became worried about the future. Nobody knew what would happen next. China did not stay quiet. The Chinese government quickly responded to President Trump's announcement. They decided to put their own large taxes on goods coming from America. China announced new tariffs of 125% on American products. This was China's way of fighting back. They wanted to show that they were not weak. They would not simply accept the American taxes without doing anything. China's response was strong. They did not seem afraid of President Trump's actions. They showed the world that they were ready for a trade disagreement. China stood firm. They did not change their plan or show signs of backing down. This made the situation between the two countries very serious. It was clear that this trade fight was just beginning. It looked like it would be a difficult time for both America and China, and also for the rest of the world watching them. 3. A new idea. Something surprising happened. President Trump started to think differently about the big taxes on Chinese goods. Only 2 weeks before, he sounded very strong about the taxes, but now his words were softer. Reports said the plan was changing. The very high tax of 245% might become much lower. Maybe it would be between 50% and 65%. This was a very big change from the first plan. Why did the president change his mind? There were maybe 2 reasons. It could be about the economy, or it could be a smart plan in the trade discussions. It was probably a little bit of both. The problems started soon after the high taxes began. The economy in the United States started to feel the pressure. Prices for many things went up. This is called inflation. It became harder for companies to get the goods they needed. Some people started to worry about a recession, which is a time when the economy is doing badly. Normal people in America felt these changes. Things like food, cars, and clothes cost more money. Life became more difficult for many families. President Trump said these problems were only for a short time, but the difficulties were real for many Americans. These economic problems put pressure on the president. It seemed these issues forced him to think about a new plan. President Trump spoke about this. He said he wanted to lower the taxes. But first he said he wanted to make a deal. He talked about maybe making a special deal. He suggested this deal could be with China. He also said that the final decision about the new, lower tax numbers would be made soon. He mentioned it would happen in the next 2 or 3 weeks. He said they needed to choose the right number and be fair. Inside the government, not everyone agreed on the high taxes from the start. Now, even some advisors who first liked the high taxes were saying it was time to slow down. The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, is the person responsible for America's money. He also said he wanted a trade deal with China. There was talk about changing how the U.S. and China trade, maybe making more things in the U.S. again. So the idea of very high taxes was changing. The problems at home seemed to push the president towards a new idea: lower taxes and making deals. 4. Problems in America. The big taxes on goods from China started to cause problems inside the United States. The American economy began to feel weak under this pressure. Things were not going as planned. Many businesses and people started to have difficulties. It was becoming a hard time across the country. The new taxes were having effects that many did not expect. One very big problem was inflation. Inflation means prices go up for many things. Because the taxes made goods from China more expensive, companies had to ask for more money for their products. So it cost more money to buy everyday items. People saw this change when they went to the shops. Food cost more. Buying a new or used car became more expensive. Even simple things like clothes cost more money. Almost everything that used parts from China or was made there was costlier. This made life much harder for many American families. Their money did not go as far as it did before. Another serious problem was with supply chains. Supply chains are the paths goods take from factories to shops. After the taxes, these supply chains were choked. It became much harder to get goods into the United States from other countries, especially China. Ships faced delays, and transport cost more. This meant shops sometimes did not have enough products on their shelves. Businesses also found it difficult to get the parts they needed to make things in America. This slowed down production for many companies and hurt their ability to sell things. Because of rising prices and supply chain troubles, many people started to worry about a recession. A recession is a bad time for the economy when it stops growing and starts getting smaller. Businesses might close down and many people could lose their jobs. News reports talked about a recession possibly being just around the corner. People felt nervous about the future. They worried about their savings and keeping their jobs. The stock market was also nervous, showing that investors were worried too. This fear made the difficult times feel even worse. Ordinary Americans felt these economic problems every day. They had to pay the higher prices for food, fuel, cars, and clothing. Many families found it difficult to pay all their bills. President Trump called these difficulties short-term pain. He said it was needed for a better future. But for the people experiencing it, the pain felt very real and stressful. They were struggling to manage the higher cost of living. These economic troubles put a lot of pressure on the president and his government. 5. People disagree. Not everyone thought the big taxes on Chinese goods were a good idea. Many people had different opinions. Some important people disagreed strongly with President Trump's plan. One famous person who spoke against the taxes was Elon Musk. He is a very well-known businessman who leads large companies. Musk did not like the tariffs. He likely thought they were bad for businesses, possibly making parts more expensive or hurting sales. His opposition showed that even successful business leaders had worries. Inside the White House, where the president and his team work, people started to argue about the taxes. There were serious disagreements. Elon Musk argued with people who worked closely with President Trump. These people, often called loyalists, supported the president's strong actions against China. Reports said the arguments became very heated. Some news stories mentioned a shouting match happened. This showed that the president's own team was divided. They did not all agree about the best way to handle trade with China. There was real tension. It was not just people like Elon Musk who had doubts. Even some advisors inside the government began to change their minds. These were people who had supported the tariffs at the start. But now, seeing the problems the taxes caused, they started to think differently. They began to suggest that the government should slow down. They wanted to de-escalate. De-escalation means trying to make a difficult situation calmer and less intense, maybe by lowering the taxes or talking more. One very important advisor who wanted a change was Scott Bessent. He held the job of Treasury Secretary. This role is about managing the country's money and looking after the economy. Scott Bessent now said he wanted a trade deal with China. He saw this as a good opportunity. Bessent talked about the United States wanting to change how it trades. He mentioned an idea called rebalancing. This meant the U.S. hoped to make more products in America again, instead of buying so many things from other countries. He also suggested that China might be thinking about changes too. Maybe China wanted its own people to buy more goods made in China and depend less on selling things to other countries. These disagreements and changing ideas showed that the tariff plan was very difficult. Many people, from business leaders to government advisors, had serious questions and concerns. The strong support for the high taxes was starting to weaken because people disagreed on the best way forward. 6. Hard times for the president. President Trump is a businessman, but he is also a politician. Being a politician means thinking about votes and support from the people. When he wanted to become president, he made a promise. He said he would put America first. The big taxes or tariffs on Chinese goods were part of this promise. He wanted to help American businesses and workers. But the tariffs did not work as planned. They caused problems for the economy in America. Prices went up for many things people buy every day. Getting goods became harder for companies. These economic problems started to cause political problems for President Trump. People were not happy about paying more money. This created political trouble for him back home. The problems grew bigger. At least 12 states in the United States decided to take the government to court. They sued the president's administration. These states did not agree that the president had the power to put such large taxes on goods from another country. They challenged his actions. People who buy and sell stocks in the stock market were also watching closely. The stock market was nervous because of the trade war and the high taxes. Investors worried about companies making less money. But when news came out that President Trump might lower the taxes, investors felt happier. They liked the idea of making things less tense between the US and China. They hoped lower taxes would be better for business. President Trump saw all these problems. He saw the economic pain people felt. He saw the political trouble, like the states suing his government. He understood that the high tariffs were causing difficulties. So he decided to change his plan a little. He started thinking about lowering the tariffs. This did not mean stopping the tariffs completely. It meant making them less high, softening the edges. He was adjusting his plan because of the hard times he was facing. 7. Making deals. The idea to make the taxes smaller was important. Before, the taxes were very high. It was hard for countries to talk about trade. Now, with lower taxes possible, there is more space for discussions. This change makes it easier for the United States and other countries to start talking again. It opens the door for new agreements and helps calm the situation. This was something President Trump wanted. He had a clear goal. He wanted other countries to make trade deals with America, but he wanted these deals to be good for the United States. He often said he wanted business done on America's terms. The high taxes were maybe a way to push countries to talk. Now that talks might happen, it looks like part of his plan is working. He wanted to be the one making the deals. With the news about possibly lower taxes, things started to change. Different countries began to contact the U.S. government. They wanted to discuss trade and avoid future problems. It seemed like many governments were ready to talk about new rules for buying and selling goods. They were lining up to speak with American officials. This was a busy time for people working on trade in Washington. One country seemed to be moving faster than others. This country was India. Reports suggested that the United States might make its first new trade deal with India. This was interesting because the problem started with taxes on Chinese goods. But now India was becoming important in these trade talks. The focus was shifting. To help make this deal happen, the American Vice President, J.D. Vance, traveled to India. He stayed in the country for 4 days. This was a significant visit. It showed that both countries were serious about making an agreement. High-level visits like this often mean that important talks are happening between governments. During his visit, Vice President Vance met India's leader, Prime Minister Modi. They had important meetings. They talked about what a trade deal between the US and India could look like. They discussed the details and made plans. They worked on the main points of a possible agreement. Both sides seemed ready to find common ground and build a stronger connection. After the visit, the message from Washington was clear. The U.S. government said that making a trade deal with India was now a top job. It was a priority. This showed that the relationship between the U.S. and India was strong. The U.S. wanted to finish this deal soon. India managed the difficult trade situation quite well during this time. It looked like they might benefit from the changes in U.S. policy. 8. The world watches. The news about lower taxes from America was important for the whole world. Many countries watched what was happening. They wanted to know what these changes meant for them. The big taxes had caused problems not just in America, but in other places too. Now maybe things could get a little better. The world's economy felt a lot of pressure because of the high taxes. With the plan to lower them, maybe this pressure could go down. It was like a small break for businesses and countries everywhere. Europe was watching very closely. The countries in Europe were between America and China. They were worried about the trade problems. Many European countries hoped that America and China could make a deal. A deal could make trade easier for everyone again. But President Trump was not always easy to understand, so Europe waited and hoped. China also watched the news from Washington. China said it was ready to talk about trade with America. They welcomed the idea of lower taxes. But China was also very careful. They knew that President Trump could change his decisions very quickly. One day he might want lower taxes, but the next day he could change his mind. So China was open to talks, but they were prepared for anything. This whole situation was a big lesson for Washington. It showed that the world's economies are all connected. You cannot just put big taxes on one country without causing problems for many others, including your own country. Things like supply chains, the way goods move around the world, are very important. They link countries together. Putting on big taxes does not make factories move to a new country overnight. These changes take a very long time and are difficult. The American plan for a trade war maybe looked strong at the start, but using it in the real world was much harder than expected. It caused many problems for America and for other countries too. It showed that changing trade rules quickly is very complicated. The world watched as America learned this lesson.